Hey guys, welcome back to my coverage of the side project I'm working on, which is called Nova Game Engine. This is part two of I don't know how many parts honestly of this series there are. I'm just kind of improvising this as I go to begin with. Um, but in the last video, I talked about some of the environmental features, some of the um, scene setup, things like that. The skybox and skysphere and all that. Before I dive back into some additional features of this engine, I think in the first video I got a little bit ahead of myself. I didn't talk about the technology behind it. This engine is written entirely in C Sharp. Well, and GLSL. There are GLSL shaders, which is the skybox and things like that, but it's mostly C Sharp. The actual UI is built with a C Sharp UI system called Avalonia. So it's all 100% C Sharp on the back end, written Avalonia for the front end, and then even the scripting system, which I'll show a little bit of that right now. The scripting is also in C Sharp. So if you open up, there's a button right here. You open up your scripts projects. You can open up your project scripts right here. I'm going to do new window. And for some reason, it gave me a tiny, just an adorable little window right here. I'm going to see if I can drag that over. It won't even let me because it's so tiny and adorable. Oh, there it goes. Okay. But yeah, so it's super tiny. It opened up a super tiny window. I don't know why it did that. I'm going to, there we go. Size that up here. And you can see this is your scripting system. So the idea, I'm not going to cover scripting today. I just want to showcase it a little bit. Um, but scripting is in C sharp. There is an entire front end that makes it, or sorry, there's an entire gameplay API that makes kind of accessing some of this stuff simple. So you can see input is key down and then key W. Um, that changes the uh, this this is a component I made for my sample for. Oh my gosh, I don't know why this window just resizes to the tiniest window possible. But that's a sample component that I put together for this character here on the scene, which I showed in the last video. And what that is this animation state controller component way down here at the bottom. And so I can open up the code back right here, and you can see what it's doing is it's just finding your sprite component, which this character has right here. And then all you have to do to change what sprite is playing, first you determine if the key is down, um, and then you just choose sprite play. So this is a null check, which is what that question mark is for anybody that's unfamiliar with C sharp. Yeah, you're just checking sprite.play and then checking the animation name. So for W, you want it to be walk up, which is it is straight. It does look up the animation by string. So uh, as long as your animation asset has a walk up animation name on it, it will play that animation. And if it doesn't find it, it just will do nothing. And then I had some debugging controls here as well. So I do have a whole Novolog system here for debug. Yes, that's funny. Ha ha ha. I have my own, uh, Nova things. There's also, ah, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't want to dive into the scripting in this video because that's not what this video is about. But I did want to show some of that for anybody wondering if you can write your own scripts and stuff in this. You absolutely can. That is one of the features that I absolutely wanted in this engine, so that's how I set it up. Um, okay, now that I've covered that a little bit, let's talk about build mode. I'm going to switch over to daylight because I do like the night scene, but it's kind of just not the best lighting for build mode. So I will kind of change it to this evening time. That's something also I don't know if you noticed in the last video if you saw me switching from day to night. There is kind of like a sunset, so you can see it happening there. So if you start bringing your directional light closer to the horizon line, it does have this nice orange hue. Um, and I will show one more thing just because um, I think it's really nice. This sunset warmth. control here. You can increase or decrease the amount of warmth in your sunset. And then there are some more sunset controls down here, like sunset strength. So if you want to boost it up or bring it back down. But yeah, so if there's a control or if there's something you can think about, there's probably a control for it. I tried to think about everything that could be added for stylization to really bring this engine into your own and create your own visuals. You are not going to get realistic visuals out of this engine. That is not what it's designed for. If that's what you want, this is the wrong engine. I do apologize, but that's not what this engine is for. Okay. Um, let me. Let's see. Gosh, I've already ranted now for a solid 6 minutes. Let's go into build mode because this is probably one of the coolest things. So let me preface this with I was heavily inspired by an application called Crocodile 3D. I think that's what it was named. It was Crocodile 3D, or maybe 2D, something like that. But I got heavily inspired by the way that that application is set up to build 3D environments. And I was like, man, that is a really cool process. Let me do something similar. Um, so that is basically how my build mode is set up. But it's a mixture of an application like that and like Blender and like RPG Maker. So if you switch to build mode, I don't know if you saw what I did there, but up here, there's this drop down here. You can switch to build mode. And when you switch to build mode, you'll see that the UI changes. And what this is, whoops, I got to fix that. What this is a, oh my gosh, my, okay, my hotkey system is kind of bugging out on me. I'm sorry. Like I said, this is still a very, very early application, so it is kind of buggy. But anyways, the way it works is you can add brushes here or select a new one, and you can just kind of paint them on, just like this. And brushes are just blank canvases for 3D meshes. So you see I added all of these brushes here, but if you're looking to do like, well, let me stop getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry, ADHD brain. Let's go to paint mode and I'll show you kind of what you can do with this. So the way it works is you load a tile set and you have to set up a tile set first in the engine. You don't just load like a PNG tile set because you have to separate it with the grid and everything. So you have to actually go over here, create a tile set here with the tile map editor. And then once you have a tile set created, you can then load up a tile set in your brush mode. And then all you got to do is select some tiles. So let's start with some of, well, let's see. Let me do something a little bit different here just to kind of differentiate it from everything else in its surroundings. You can start painting tiles like this, and you can also hold and drag and just kind of paint over your empty tile canvases. And it's all complete with undo. So everything is tracked and undoable. Something that is not going to work is there is multi-tile painting, but because these are all separate brushes, I can't actually multi-tile paint across these, but that's okay, because what you can do is you can right-click and start deleting these brushes. You can paint a new brush. We'll go back to brush mode. I need to see, at some point, I had a visual indicator as to what mode you were on, but I guess I overrode it or it bugged out. So I need to go back in and fix that, but I'm not going to do that right now. But I'm going to switch, make sure I click on brush here, switch back to brush mode. I'm going to paint this box brush down here, make sure it's selected. This is your panel for selecting like what brushes are in the scene, and then these are the actual properties for the box brush. What I'm thinking I'll probably do is move these properties over to this panel, over to the inspector panel, and leave this brush hierarchy over here. That way, visually, it works the same way as scene mode. But for at the moment, everything's just crammed into this left-hand panel here. Anyways, so I'm gonna select this box brush, and you can adjust the width and height of the box. So I'm going to do the width at 3. I'll do the height at 2, and that gives me a 3 by 2 box. And I can also increase the depth of it. So if I wanted to, I could make the depth also 3, and I get a box brush kind of like this one over here. So this is a separate brush. This is a separate actor, actually. So I didn't explain kind of how this works because I started jumping ahead of myself. But I will cover how these things are actually placed, because everything it's all grid based. You can see like you're painting on a grid here as I hover my mouse around. You can adjust the grid size, so that actually the grid size changes the scale of everything in your box. I don't want to change it on this because that my environment is built around this build actor here. But you can see down here at the bottom, there's also a build actors selector. So I have this forest tiles, which is the one I'm currently painting on. So if I change the size of the grid like this, it's going to scale everything way larger. It's going to, you see, change the size of like this brush that I just painted and that brush. The reason everything else didn't change with it is because I did a lot of changes to the way brush meshes work. So I actually need to probably repaint this like this landscape down here, and these old brushes like this, these rocks and these plants and stuff like that to get it to scale properly. This was an old scene, so it's like halfway worked and worked up with the new system, and also has like really old style brushes. So these are working the correct way. This one and this one, they should be scaling with the size of the grid. The tree back there and everything else are older brushes from before I like reworked the way the meshes work. So that's why they're not scaling properly. So I'm going to undo that actually, just so that way everything fits back together. And I'll show you tile painting with multi-select tiles. So let's do, I'm going to just select these tiles here on this grid, this little like staircase here. I'm going to go back into paint mode. You can see now, as long as I'm painting on the forest tiles, that I can paint this whole thing with one click. You'll see that there's kind of a preview here, and I don't know if that actually shows up too well, but you can see like the blue box preview in the camera there. And if I click, it paints the tiles. I'll click up here. Actually, we'll click there, and I'll select this and paint on top. And that is the same way that I painted this little staircase thing over here. Now, brushes by default, if I go back into scene mode and I hit play, brushes by default, when you paint them, they do not have collision. And that is because if you wanted to have, you know, say a doorway or something that you wanted to walk through, like this, then there's no collision there. But what you can do is you can add a collision mesh. So collision meshes are actually separate actors. They are their own actor. Actually, collision actors are a thing, and you can see it. Well, you can't actually see it because character actor is a child of collision actor, but character actor is a collision actor. So it has its own collider component. If I turn on collider visibility, which is this button right here, you can see that the character actor actually has a capsule collider on it. And then over here, I put a box collider. It's kind of overlapping with all the other colliders in the scene, so it's hard to visualize, but you can see that there's a box collider right here on this wedge shape. So if I go back into play mode, I can walk right up this collider here, and the character walks up it. So, but yeah, by default, there is no collision on these brushes, and I don't think there needs to be honest. For games like this, you kind of want to draw your colliders sparingly. Now, I'll probably have a way to easily add colliders to brushes at some point, maybe with like just a Boolean value or something like spawn with collider, just because that would make it simple to like quickly paint a scene without having to go in and add a bunch of colliders later or something later like that. But right now, that is not an option. So But yeah, that's basically build mode in a nutshell. You can do a lot of really cool things with it. Something I didn't show is I'm going to delete that brush there. Now you can see that there is a transparent, like there's transparent tiles here. Like they have transparency. And that is not a bug, that is actually on purpose. Because if I go to my dungeon tiles here and I switch to these and I zoom in, now I'll paint a new box. I'm going to go back to brush mode. I'm going to paint a box. And let's see. I want to paint, oh, I don't know. Let's make a plane. Planes are kind of fun. And I'm going to make it, let's see, a 2x3 plane. So I'm going to select this double-sided plane here. I make it 3 and height of 2. And I'm going to paint these bushes on it. So I'm going to go to paint mode, paint these bushes. And now I kind of have some bushes here. Um, which is fun, right? So you can see, like, you can see through the transparent tiles and everything like that. And that's on purpose because it gives you this nice effect. And what's great about this, if I move this plane, oh yeah, by the way, you can move brushes. If I move this, the you can see the lighting. I think because of how low the sun is to the horizon, you can't really tell. But you can see the lighting for the transparency is actually interacting with the lighting system. So it's casting a shadow based on the transparency of the tiles. So if I bring this back down, I'm going to go back to scene mode. I'm going to go back to my directional light. And I'll bring this down. I have a point light here inside of this little building right here. And I can move it around and you can see the lighting changing with the transparency of the tiles, of the brush tiles, which is great. So it allows you to create those little effects. I'm going to go back into play mode also and just kind of show you what I was talking about with like the door. So see, there's no transparency on it, or sorry, there's no collision on it. So you can walk right through it kind of like it's a door. Um, so if there was a little sound effect that played, you know, like a little you wouldn't even need to have an animation for it. You could just have a little sound effect and it would just be like, you know, you're walking through a little double door like to a saloon or something, or one of those little gates at an airport. And it's just a nice way to um, keep your. I had a train of thought there, and then it disappeared because I get ahead of myself all the time. But anyways, it's uh, it's just a nice feature to have. So you don't want to have everything have collision. Now you shouldn't be able to walk through the sides like this, especially because that's like a brick wall with like a sewage gate or something. But I didn't put any colliders around that box either, so you can walk into it. But you can see that the light is kind of being held within the object there, which allows for some really nice visuals. So that's about it, I think, right now for build mode. There is a lot more I can talk about with this engine, but build mode is kind of the expected way for people to build levels in this engine whenever I release it to the public. And there's not like a landscape feature or anything like that, but I might would add a way to maybe randomly generate things. I've thought a lot about having like kind of a environment generation system, but I need to figure out how to make that work with my like tile map system and things like that. Now I know this is honestly a solved problem. Minecraft did it what 15, 20 years ago they whenever that released. So technically it's a non-issue. It's just something that I have to figure out how to do. But I also want to build it in a way that it's modular for the users. So like anybody developing a game with Nova would be able to customize the parameters of the random generation and like define tiles as like ground tiles and rocks and foliage and things like that. Um, there's a feature right now that I'm kind of working on, which is a foliage system, and I'll show a little bit about that because I have the baseline implemented for it, but it's not anywhere close to complete. But the way the foliage system works is it's just going to kind of paint. Oops, I deleted my ground. You have to be careful. Right click deletes your brush meshes, which I thought at the time was a clever way to delete brushes, but I've noticed now as I've navigated and rotated my camera that sometimes I can release, right click, click and release, and it'll delete the floor plate. Well, see, now it's kind of making an ass out of me. Anyways, you can right click and delete your floor. Um, but yeah, anyways, onto the foliage system that I was talking about. What I meant by I have like sort of the base for it implemented is really just getting planes to billboard. Um, so these plane brushes that you can spawn that I showed earlier, there's a button down here or a toggle for billboard, and that'll just make it billboard and follow the camera, which is sort of the base. Like the system is what the foliage system that I'm planning on adding is based on. The foliage system is going to work very similar to Unreal Engine's foliage system. I know I'm borrowing a lot from Unreal Engine, but honestly, they do a lot right, and they do a lot that is just way overcomplicated. So it is going to have a similar like radial brush where you can start painting like foliage planes at random. Um, but they are going to be scaled differently. They're going to be kind of scaled down. The actual size that they're painting on, they should still be painted, or I say should, they will still be painted based on the grid, but they'll be able to be painted in such a way that like the intervals are like, they have a half step or a quarter step, things like that, so that way they can kind of get in between tiles and not just be fixed at every tile point. um, Oh, speaking of intervals, there's a whole feature of brush mode that I completely glossed. Well, I didn't even gloss over it. I just skipped it. It's one of the more interesting features. There's a button up here that says Edit. And what you can do with that is you can actually edit your brushes that you've painted onto the ground. So I'm going to select my Dungeon Tiles actor here. Whichever actor that you've selected, that is your context. So that's what you're editing. And I'll go to edit mode here, and you can actually edit the mesh of your brush. So you can adjust the vertices and the faces and things like that and kind of reshape the shape of your brush that you've painted there. And it still works with the tile-based painting system. So if I go back to paint mode here and I paint, let's say, up here, the tiles are still there, but now they're just kind of warped. So they just warp with your brush that you've painted. But you can still go in, go back to edit. Let's go to face. I can bring like this up a little bit and stretch it. But yeah, so whoops. Oh, that was extrude. That's a broken feature. I didn't mean to show on video. Extrude is another one that's being worked on. It does not work properly as you just saw, but it is there. If you hit E, the hotkey for extruding is there. But yeah, that was a misclick on my part. I didn't mean to showcase such unholy features. Oh my gosh, now I can't even stop. Stop. Stop stopping. Stop. Let's go back to brush mode. Because when you switch to edit mode, your hotkeys kind of change. It doesn't tell you that your hotkeys change, but they do change. Um, but yeah. Oh, another thing is you can switch these modes with the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 keys. So if I go to 2, that's paint mode. Now I'm painting. I go back to 1, that's brush mode. Now I'm putting brushes down. 3 is fill mode, which fill mode is going to fill all the face of the entire the all the tiles on a face. It's going to fill them with whatever you have selected. So you do that, and bam, now I have the whole roof filled up with that, or I can switch back to the bricks, which I like the bricks better. I think these are, yeah, those two are the exact same tile actually. Or I can make it all, spikes. Make it all spikes. So yeah, fill mode is just an easy way to get started with your landscape. Erase is gonna delete the tile um, from the face, so that way you can repaint it if you want. And that includes transparent tiles. So transparent tiles, if you erase the tile, now the face is back. No transparency. And then edit mode is where you actually go in and you edit your brush, like your actual mesh. So there is snapping here, so you can snap it to different intervals. That's what I was talking about earlier. So there's a 1-step full tile snap. There's a half step, quarter step, eighth step, and 16th step. So that way you can kind of get like pretty like fine, precise movements. It almost looks like you're just kind of moving it naturally. You got to be careful though, because it does start to break if you go too far in certain directions. So you got to be careful with that. Also, each step, even though I'm dragging it like this, um, each of those is adding a command to the undo. So you have to like hold it and like continuously undo. I will fix that later. That's something I'm aware of, like I just showed. I will fix it at some point. It's just there for now. But yeah, so that was build mode for Nova Game Engine. Um, in the next video, I'll showcase more about it, maybe particle system or something like that. But for now, that's kind of those are the biggest features. Honestly, is the environment and um, the build mode, which is the thing I'm most proud of. Which honestly, it wasn't 100% an original idea, and I'm aware of that. But Crocodile 3D had a good thing going, and it's a really cool program. So definitely recommend going and checking them out if you're interested in doing this sort of thing on your own time or importing it into your own engines, or your own projects, because you can build some interesting levels with it. So this is um, where I got that idea from. And yeah, I will showcase more about Nova in the next video. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time.